It reminds me that I don't want to be just successful, that I don't want to be just good at things, that I want to do what's important, what matters. I'm over being remembered or famous. If it happens, great. Mostly, I want to make a difference. And to do that, I need to show up every day and put in the work that will inspire my younger self and cause me to look forward to, at the very least, not be worried about the person I was about to become. More than anything, I want to be able to assure my younger self that my life would have meaning, that I would do something, and that this something would matter. Which is an excerpt from the best book I've ever read on skill stacking, How to Be Better at Almost Anything by Pat Flynn, which is the book we're going to be dissecting together in 3 parts, starting with part 1, skill stacking over specialization. You don't have to be the best in the world to get ahead. Man, this statement is so good. Like, you just even need to look around. I'm sure you know people that are getting ahead, but they're not necessarily what you call the best. It says you don't need to be number 1 to see the limelight strike you rich or find meaning in life. You only need to be good or great or at least fairly competent at a few things, and then combine those things to foster that utmost creative quality within yourself. Specialization, a goal that has been instilled into most of us from an early age, is a snare that has entrapped people for long enough. This book is about to put an end to that. We can say that specialization is really what the whole academic system emphasizes. You see that the higher you go, the more specialized you're expected to become. Previously, I've had a bad experience with not having enough skills in a particular area. So in 2019, I was in Nigeria at the time. I was interviewing for a job at GT Bank, and then the interview had like several phases because there are usually like so many applicants. Over like 400 applicants applying for a job that they're going to give like 20 or 30 people or even less. So we had a phase of the test where we were meant to do 50 questions in 12 minutes. And then I passed that stage, but then I moved on to the phase of the physical interview. And at that time, I didn't have strong communication skills. So although I had the problem solving skills and analytical skills, and with the first class in maths, all the skills that I got, I didn't have good communication skills. And so that interview was like the worst interview I've ever had, and then I was not accepted. So at that time, if I'd developed my communication skills, my soft skills, in addition to the technical skills that I got in school, I would have stood a better chance of getting that job. I want to teach you, one step at a time, a new way of learning and acquiring skills that you can use, if you so choose, to start a business, and thus give you a much better chance of not finding but creating success. Emphasis on creating success, so you can create your own success. It says people can take businesses away from you, and so can a bad economy. Life happens. But no one can rob you of skills unless they rob you of life, which just wouldn't be very nice. So this reminded me of what I read from Sam Walton's autobiography. That's the founder of Walmart and Sam's Club. Initially, when he was starting out, he didn't have his own store. So he was managing like Ben Franklin stores at that time. And so he moved to a city called Newport, and he had a goal that within 5 years, this little store will be the most profitable within the whole Arkansas. Now he achieved the goal. The store was doing about $250,000 in sales and $30,000 to $40,000 in profit a year. Now he realized after 5 years that the initial contract that he signed with his landlord for the place, there was no clause of possible renewal. And so this is what he said in his own words. And our success, it turned out, had attracted a lot of attention. My landlord, the department store, was so impressed with our Ben Franklin success that he decided not to renew our lease at any price, knowing fully well that we had nowhere else in town to move the store. Although this happened, his business that he had built was taken from him. His skills wasn't taken from him. And that's why we have the wonderful Walmart story today. This book is about generalism. Our goal is to become better than most people at most things, even if we aren't the best at any one skill. Now, this the best that he's talking about here is like the best in the world, because it might be the best in your state and actually the best in your country. Yeah, but it's the best in the world that he's talking about. Most people are somewhat okay at one or two things, and then either completely incompetent or downright terrible at everything else. I believe everyone has a major gift or talent that makes them unique. Now, it's placed in us by God, and it's something that we enjoy doing. It gives us more life, and is also our way of contributing to the improvement of the world. Developing skills will help us find it faster, because the skills you'll be developing are the ones that you are interested in. And also, your uniqueness might be found through a blend of multiple skills. So for me, my one thing is teaching. I love to teach. And so in May, I decided I was going to learn the skill of touch typing to make my creative process faster. And it actually worked. We call this skill stacking. That's combining skills in a unique and useful way, which gives you more breadth and versatility than someone who specializes in one thing. Happiness, as the philosophers will tell us, involves engaging in and enjoying a genuinely good activity. It seems that fulfillment is found not in what we accumulate, as opposed to popular opinion, but rather in what we endeavor to do. In other words, skills are good because they give us something good to engage in, and we all need that. This is very similar to what Henry Ford, one of the greatest entrepreneurs that's ever lived, said in his autobiography, My Life and Work. The natural thing to do is to work, to recognize that prosperity and happiness can be obtained only through honest effort. Human ills flow largely from attempting to escape from this natural cause. I have no suggestion which goes beyond accepting in its fullest this principle of nature. And so for those that are concerned about specialists, here's the balance that Pat gave in the book. I'm not saying the world doesn't need specialists like Usain Bolt or Michael Phelps or whoever designs microchips for NASA. But I'm saying I was never going to be that good. And not to sound insulting, I doubt you were either. And that's fine, because most people shouldn't be specialists to begin with. That's why we have generalism. Man, I just love the way Pat writes. Like, his sense of humor is just so good. So from my research on geniuses, the people that the world considers specialists, they were either trained when they were very young, like around 4 years old, by their parents, or they did unbelievable hours of work. Just like Michael Phelps, he swam 13 kilometers a day, 6 or 7 days a week, even on Sundays and his birthdays. He usually split his trainings into 2 sessions, spending 5 to 6 hours in the pool a day, and then there was the time in the gym. Let's look at Tiger Woods. At the age of 4, Tiger Woods shot 38 11 over par for 9 holes at a course in California. That's at the age of 4. By the time he turned pro at age 20, it took less than a year to reach world number 1. Serena and Venus Williams. Richard Williams, their father, wrote up an 85-page plan and started giving lessons to Venus and Serena when they were 4.5, taking them to practice on public tennis courts. Finally, let's talk about the 3 Polgar sisters that all became chess grandmasters before the age of 20. You can imagine the age their father started training them. So you see that some of them have already clocked their 10,000 hours of practice to become an expert, even before the age of 20. Now that you're on the skill stacking team, yay! We need to tell you the rules of the game, which leads us on to part 2, the 5 rules of generalism. To become a skill stacker, you need to learn how to learn skills quickly. Learn how to learn. I like the sound of that. Learn how to learn. And this requires a thorough understanding of the 5 foundational principles, starting with skill stacking over specialization. Simply put, it's better to be better than most people at most things than to be the best at any one thing. Skills in combination are more powerful than individual skills by themselves, even if they aren't as fully developed. Wow. This is the fundamental advantage of being a generalist. But it's not enough to acquire skills. You must also learn to combine them. So the acquisition is one thing, but the most important part is the combination. To help us better understand this principle, we'll be applying it to the skill of learning to play the guitar. Now that's the example that he used in the book. But then for some strange reason, that's also the instrument I want to learn. So sounds like a good choice. Secondly, short-term specialization. Being a generalist doesn't mean you try to improve at everything at once. Man, that would be so overwhelming. Good generalists are really just short-term specialists, in the sense that they focus on 1 or 2 things at a time, and once those things are developed up to 80%, but never beyond, say the next principle, they then turn their attention to something else. So here we need to figure out the best way to practice. Finding out things like how much practice is necessary, how much time daily is too much, and also how much is too little. Pat also says that when in doubt, ask someone that has done it before. That could be either hiring a coach or doing an online course on it or watching YouTube videos. So I did some research for our guitar training, and then Justin Guitar, a fellow YouTuber, recommends that we practice for an hour a day, 5 days a week. Now during the 1 hour practice, we are supposed to work in 5-minute bursts, and then we have a minute of rest in between. The third rule is the rule of 80%. The rule of 80% says that if 100% is the best in the world, then never go beyond 80% at anything. Because that's specialization territory. 80%, believe me, is still masterful. So you can safely assume that if you're 80% good at something and still not getting ahead in life, then that something is not your problem. You know that it's time to acquire another skill. There are some cases where this can be measured. For instance, deadlifting, where we have the world's heaviest deadlift to be about 1,279 pounds. While in some others, it can be measured. For instance, what will you say that 100% of guitar playing is? So sometimes this rule serves as a form of guide that if we are good now in our guitar skills in this kind of music, then that is not my problem. I should focus on developing another skill. To take us into the practicals, we have integration over isolation. This principle states that you should practice only the things you need to get good at as they pertain to the task at hand. This may seem obvious, but often people focus too much attention on techniques or skills that makes no sense for what they want to achieve. So we have to ask, what kind of guitar player do you want to be? Do you want to be a rock player, a jazz player, a country guitar player, or a gospel music player? So let's say we pick gospel music because that's what I want to learn. So here's his recommendation. It's so good. Say you choose the guitar. Well, then start with the song. Either get someone to teach it to you or pull up an instructional video on the interweb or here on YouTube and take it beat by beat. Right away, you run into something you can't do. That something may be learning to hold the pick the correct way, so you isolate that technique until you get it right, but don't rush. You see that we're learning with a song, we're not just learning notes independently. Another name I'll call this is project-based learning, and it works in all areas, like learning how to code, learning how to create videos, you name it. You can always find a project to do and then reverse engineer from there. You also see the importance of rest in learning. Now when learning, we have to maximize the two modes of our brain, which is the focus mode when we are actively learning, and then the diffuse mode when we are resting or we are doing something else. You probably experienced this before where you had like an assignment from school, and then when you were focusing on it in focus mode, you couldn't solve it. There were some roadblocks that you encountered. But when you went away, probably rested, did something else, and then you came back, it was now easier to solve. What happened within that rest period was that your brain was working on it in the background. So this also happens when we are developing skills. Finally, repetition and resistance. Finally, if you want to get better at something, you need to not only practice that something, but also find ways to make it harder on yourself. It's not enough to simply do something. You also need to make that something difficult for yourself. After learning our first song, can we try to play it faster? Or can we even learn another song, a more difficult one? Or to even take it a step further, can we learn 5 more songs and promise to play it in the next hangout that we go for? So these are the ways that we are getting more reps, and with more reps we are increasing the resistance so that we are growing too in the process. Now that you understand the rules of generalism, you are ready for part 3, the 5 meta skills everyone should have. There's a scene in the 1967 version of the movie, The Jungle Book, that shows us the first meta skill to have.
That's the way I earned my commission in the Maharaja's 5th Pachyderm Brigade. Back in '88, it was, what was it?
Here it comes. The Victoria Cross bit again.
It was then I received the Victoria Cross for bravery above and beyond the call of duty. Ha ha! Those were the days. Discipline. Discipline was a thing. Builds character. All that sort of thing, you know.
The first skill is discipline. What is discipline? Well, I'm glad you asked. Discipline is this: putting yourself in a position to follow others, and hopefully, eventually, your own. Yes, there are externally imposed discipline, like the assignments and deadlines that we get in school. But at some point, we have to learn to develop that internal discipline, where we can get ourselves to do the things that we need to do, even if it's not convenient. Discipline gives us meaning then, because it gives us something to do, Through discipline, we work at our crafts and can make things. We also learn things. And through discipline, we develop a routine that makes sense of our day. We wake up, steep the coffee grounds, and start on something big and fantastic. Hopefully fun too. We set our butts in the seats and use them to do kettlebell swings. When reading the book, one of the things that you see is that Pat Flynn loves kettlebells a lot. Moving on, maybe towards the evening, there's time for a dessert. But let's just see how the day goes before we make any decisions about that. Discipline sets the agenda, and that's what makes us productive and creative. Finally, how do you get started? The question answers itself. Get started. And get started on something that interests you. Because discipline isn't a skill you develop in isolation, like learning discipline. It's a skill you develop through integration, through the practice of something specific, like karate. The secret is to start with whatever rouses the emotions. That's whatever infuses you with passion. As Matthew Dix, the author of Storyworthy and Some Days Today, said, excitement leads to motivation, and motivation leads to momentum. So it's good to start with the skills that you're excited about. To remain disciplined for a long time, you need the next skill: focus. If there's anything I've noticed about life, is that most of us probably think too much, and that most of the thinking we do isn't super abundantly helpful. Just as Wale Swatu said in The Science of Being Great, thinking is the hardest and most exhausting of all labor, and hence many people shrink from it. God has so formed us that we are continuously impelled to thought. We must either think or engage in some activity to escape thought. This means that we must think if we are not distracted by entertainment like social media. But the thinking that Pat Flynn is talking about here is what we call overthinking. This is one of the things I said in the book that I don't completely agree with. Thinking is a skill, and one we'll soon get into. That's actually the next skill we're talking about, although the name is not called thinking. But not thinking is also a skill, and that's called focus. The reason why I don't agree with this definition is that when you're focusing on something, you still have to think for you to make significant progress. But the kind of thinking that focus stops is like fantasy and distractions and overthinking too as well. Here's the thing, and I don't know how else to put this. There are enemies out there trying to do everything they can to stop us from succeeding. Demonic forces, I'm convinced, that delight in our undoing and that we absolutely must battle against if we want to survive. Sound serious? Well, it's true. Author Stephen Pressfield calls this universal negative force resistance. And maybe I'm a bit old school, so I'll just think of it as the devil. I love the fact that he makes it clear that no one is set up to succeed by default. No one. We all have to apply ourselves with the skills that we have to give ourselves a better chance. Now the Bible says a man's gifts makes room for him and brings him before great men. So by default, there's no room for anyone. It's your gifts and your skills that will make room for you. It's not only the goings on of life that get us distracted. It's our thinking as well. That's where focus comes in. It's pretty much the only weapon we have to be able to stay on target, to sit and stay seated, or run and keep running. And this, believe me, is a skill. It's not something any of us have. It's something we develop. He recommends meditation or prayer as one of the best ways to build focus. Meditation is something you're supposed to practice very nearly all the time. Only 3 words: always be present. That was what separated Michael Jordan from every other person. The next skill is logic. What's that? Why does logic matter? Okay, here's what philosopher Norman Geisler had to say about it. Simply put, you can't avoid studying logic, so you might as well know what you're doing. It's the basis for all other studies. It's the basis for all math and science. Even music, from Bach to the Beach Boys, is based on logic. Without it, there could be no rational discussion of anything. Writing would be impossible. How can you put a sentence together without a logical order? For example, YouTube videos create I. What does that mean? It just makes common sense. Or should I say, it sounds logical. See what I did there? Logic is ordering your thoughts. It's thinking done well and done right. It's what stops us from buying stupid things and voting for stupid people and putting our fingers in places that could shock us.
So how do you get better at it?
Well, one way, and this is going to sound simple, but it works, is by practicing puzzles. There are so many apps and games these days that set you up with logical exercises. Starting your day solving a few of these puzzles will do a lot to build your critical capacity.
See the note I wrote when I was reading it? Focus. It's one of the reasons I'm very grateful for my first degree. The major thing I would say from getting a master's degree was not the abstract algebra or the complex analysis or the real analysis that I did, but the ability to approach a problem and solve it analytically. We've spoken about discipline, focus, and logic. The next skill is persuasion.
We need to talk about persuasion because it's hard to get what you want in life without being able to convince people to give it to you. That's just the reality of things.
Exactly. For example, I spent about 20 hours reading this book and doing research to create a great video that I know will really help you. But I needed to package the title and thumbnail in a way that would appeal to growth-minded people like yourself.
People are attracted to those who have something to say and who apparently believe in that something. The first thing is to become very okay with the fact that not everybody is going to like you and not everyone is going to agree with what you have to say. Because as soon as you have something to say, there's always someone that would disagree with it. Even if you state that the earth is round, there'll be someone who disagrees with it, unfortunately, and someone who will be offended by it.
Everyone can like you, and it's okay. There's a popular saying that if you want everyone to like you, go and sell ice cream. And I have some really weird friends that don't like ice cream. And so, by logical conclusion, they will not like you as well.
You may ask, how do you even practice this? That's persuasion. It says, well, you practice it by, again, getting into arguments and writing advertisements and sharing your beliefs with people. Also by networking, by reaching out, by being friendly and offering help.
In other words, put yourself out there. Don't just allow all your thoughts and everything to be going on in your head. Get out there, share the things that you know, share the things you're passionate about. Probably start a YouTube channel or start a blog or start creating in any one of the social media platforms. Just an avenue to share your ideologies, share your beliefs, share the things that you're passionate about, and then take a stand on them. Sometimes you have feedback, you get some form of criticisms, but it also helps to strengthen your stand. The final skill is faith. And yes, I was surprised as well.
You might be wondering why in the world I would say faith is a skill, and of all things, a foundational skill. Well, I think for a lot of people, faith doesn't come as naturally as it does to others.
The Bible says that everyone has been given a measure of faith. So if it comes more naturally to some people than others, it's because of upbringing and experiences. So you would expect someone that their parents modeled faith for them to have the same expression of faith as someone that had an experience that made them to have questions about the existence of God.
I think people sometimes equate faith with credulity. Oh, you just believe things without evidence. But that isn't what faith is. At least, that isn't what faith should be. Faith is simply trusting in that which you have good reason to believe. That's so good. I'll say it again. Faith is simply trusting in that which you have good reason to believe. For example, it's like being married. I can't verify that my wife loves me, at least not empirically. And to even suggest conducting such an experiment would cost me a considerable amount of grief. But I have good reason to believe that she does, in fact, love me. I'm trusting in that which I have good reason to believe.
So you could check your life to see if you had previous occurrences that you called luck, or good things that happened to you that you didn't deserve, or prayers you had that were answered. Then you've got good reason to believe.
And sometimes Pat writes, and he's so blunt. This is one of those times. He says, there's one problem with having faith that I forgot to mention. And that problem is this. As soon as you believe in something greater than yourself, you must accept that there's a reason for being here that transcends your selfish little ego.
Every one of us has a bigger purpose for being here. Two of the best autobiographies I've read this year are Henry Ford and Sam Walton. These are two men that dedicated their lives to what Jesus called servant leadership. Henry Ford made cars available to everyone through decades of improvement. And then Sam Walton made merchandise to be affordable and available to people in small towns, especially here in the US. All that was on their mind was serving the customer. Actually, I didn't know how big this country was until I arrived here 2 years ago. US is big.
Okay, great. How does all this play into becoming better at almost everything? I'll tell you. Faith is the ultimate and perhaps only way of orienting yourself towards happiness. Wow, that's profound. It's what drives your efforts and goals in a direction that actually will fulfill you and actually could make a difference in the world. That's one big reason we need to practice. And notice I didn't say have, in quotes, faith. Not the I go to church on Sundays or I read a spiritual book once kind of faith. No. But a deep, abiding love of humanity and God. Faith is the orienting mechanism.
Practice. You do it every day. Someone might have hurt you or offended you or cheated you yesterday, but you don't treat other people like that today. You have faith. God is ongoing with his work. He never stopped.
You're building a skill stack so that it can change the world. Maybe even save it. And serve some greater purpose in life. Having a why, that's having faith, is what will keep your butt in the chair or get your butt to the gym. I don't know, the guy uses butt a lot in this book. You've got to offer it up. We can argue that at the end of your life, faith is the only skill that is going to matter. That's so good. I'm going to read it again. It says we can argue that at the end of your life, faith is the only skill, wow, that is going to matter. What you'll be remembered for is the person you were and how you affected others. If we think back on our friends and loved ones that have passed away, what do we remember them for? It's the kind of people that they were, it's how they touched lives, not necessarily what they had or what they accumulated.
That's where I'll leave for this video. A very great book I recommend you read. Today I was working off the Kindle version, but then you can get a physical version through the link in the description below. And if you use that link to get it, you'll also be supporting this channel as well. I'm pivoting this channel to be more about book reviews because every week I read about 1 to 2 books. And so I'll be coming here to share the valuable insights with you. Please give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want to see more. Thank you so much for watching. And then I'll see you in the next book.